My name's Jordan Burrs, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at my best bets for quarterfinal 3, Morocco versus Portugal, and quarterfinal 4, England versus France. Before we get into that though, make sure you subscribe to the Odd Shoppers channel because we post daily predictions, daily previews, and daily No House Advantage videos. Speaking about No House Advantage, No House Advantage is bringing you the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play 'em and pick 'em contest versus other people for a shot at winning up to $25,000 in cash. Be sure to also check out our No House Advantage lineup generators and projections. Test your skills versus the house and 20x your entry if you hit all of your picks. Sign up now with the link below to get your first match deposit bonus of up to $50. Without further ado, let's get into my best picks, Morocco versus Portugal. Now this game is closer than a lot of people think and closer than what the bookies are letting on. Morocco have been in incredible form. Their defense is probably one of the best in the tournaments at the moment. They've only conceded one own goal, which was against Canada. They didn't concede against Croatia. They didn't concede against Belgium, and they didn't concede against Spain, who scored against Germany and put 7 past Costa Rica. So props must go to this Moroccan side. They do play to their game plan. They take about 25 to 40% possession in a game. They defend, then they hit the teams on the counter attack with Hakimi up the right wing and Ziyech in the middle there. And I must give a massive shout out to Bono, the Moroccan goalkeeper, for the last game against Spain, saving 3 penalties in the penalty shootout. But they are coming up against a Portugal side who looked revived in the round of 16. Obviously, we know Cristiano Ronaldo didn't start that game. Ramos came on and scored a hat-trick, 21 years of age, for his 3rd cap in the Portuguese colours and for his first game in a World Cup. Incredible stuff by the youngster, and I think he's going to start again ahead of Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I do think Morocco can upset Portugal here. Morocco's defense is very good. I've been saying it the entire competition, and I'm going to keep saying it. I also think they're good at counter-attacking and taking the opportunities and being clinical. Yes, we didn't see that too much in the Spanish game. They missed about 2 or 3 clear-cut opportunities, but I don't think they miss again. I think this is going to be a draw through extra time, and I think it's going to go to penalties again, and then it can go either way. And looking at Morocco's last penalty shootout, they will be confident going into this. So my best pick for this game is Morocco overall winner, or Morocco to advance to the semi-finals, being the first African nation to do so at odds of plus 235. Then my second best pick and final best pick comes out of the England versus France game. Now, games don't get much bigger than this in a World Cup. You've got Mbappe, who's been in absolutely incredible form, leading the Golden Boot, and will want to be winning the Golden Boot by the end of the competition. Then you've got this England side, and to be fair, England in the past years, in the past sort of decade or two, have relied on one person to carry them through a World Cup, and this team is a little bit different. Yes, Harry Kane hasn't really been amongst the goals, but he's been getting the assist. And then you've got Declan Rice, you've got Jude Bellingham, you've got Saka, you've got Phil Foden, even Jordan Henderson scored the other night. So this England team is looking very, very good, well connected, and very threatening on attack. However, you just cannot look over this France side. France, Mbappe in that Poland game had hardly any chances, and he creates something out of nothing. You add that with a Giroud and a Griezmann who are going to be feeding him balls. I think France can get this done. I also think it's going to be high scoring. Well, when I say high scoring, probably 2-1, but I do think both teams get a goal in this game, and then France probably clinch it in extra time with a 2-1 or 3-2 victory or something like that.
Yes, I am. Welcome to Stokastic's On the Contrary, sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm joined by 2 DFS goats, not the usual DFS goat. Alex is not here today, but you're familiar with both of these guys if you've watched this show this year. We've got Steve Buzzard with us, aka DeColts. You can find him on Twitter at Steve Buzzard. And Brian Hooper is back, aka Bric75. You can find him on Twitter at Brian Hooper __. And this show is sponsored by Prize Picks, which offers daily prop-based contests. While you're coming in, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the alert button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. And of course, this content is also available in podcast form. If you are listening on a podcast, please help us out by leaving a 5-star review. Brian, I had to invite you on here today because I've missed you, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Your co-host on Lowell's, Pete Overzet, just became a father this week, and you guys have been taking a break for the show, from the show. So I'll start by asking, how long is paternity leave at the Lowell's Corporation?
Well, it's supposed to be 0 days. He was supposed to show up yesterday, but he still called in saying, we have no idea how long. I have no idea how long he's going to, however long he wants. So, I'm guessing a month or so or 2. I don't know how long he wants to. He's going to be a busy man here. Did you guys see who was like trending above like Biden and Kim Jong-un?
I saw you posting about it. I wasn't sure if that was actually about Pete or if it was about somebody else. Pete, was it?
Yeah, if you
Pete
click
Davidson?
it was him.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought maybe it was like Pete Davidson with the Emily Ratajkowski news, all that. I don't know, but that's pretty awesome. I mean, his post about having baby April was going viral, so that's exciting for Pete. But it's a bummer that we're not going to get Lowe's for a little. Were you really planning on doing a show yesterday?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
No, I wasn't going to force the man.
I thought maybe while you were waiting for the baby, you were gonna maybe keep doing shows. But are you going to be doing any other shows or pods in the meantime?
Yeah, I'm trying to get up the motivation and probably do a couple by myself or something.
Okay.
Nice. In the meantime, I'll do something. I really got to get off my ass and do something here. So
I know you're always doing stuff with like Davis Maddock. You're on his show as a guest a lot.
Yeah.
Doing guest spots on a lot of other shows. So hopefully we can get our fill in the meantime. Hear from Brian from time to time between now and whenever Pete is ready to come back. Steve, we had a mess of a situation last night in Showdown. I actually want to talk to both of you guys about this, what you did with the quarterback situation for the Rams. I'm going to start with you, Steve. How did you handle this? Because I was big in on John Wolford. I was, doing a live show. I talked about a good amount that I thought if he's starting, he's probably going to play, the majority of the game at least, and nobody's going to play him. And I was half right. Nobody played him. He was 10% owned, starting quarterback on a Showdown slate. I got the other half wrong though, because they took him out after 0 passes thrown. How did you handle the situation, Steve?
Yeah, so 10% owned was what he was. That was my thought as well. He was going to be pretty low owned. I didn't have a ton of confidence in him, not just because Mayfield, but just he hasn't been good also. So it sounded like not a great situation. So I actually went 0% on Mayfield, and then I had maybe 15% on Wolford, which is probably one of the lowest quarterback combos I've had for a team this year. Normally I'm like 50% maybe or something. I think I might have had for Carr in the 50 or 60% range, which actually he was worse than Mayfield. So that was unfortunate, but that was my thought. He was going to be low owned. So I thought he was still Wolford, was still worth a shot. Kind of thought Mayfield might be worth a shot, but I figured he was going to be low enough owned that he wouldn't break the slate necessarily, even if he played a little bit more than he would. But clearly I was completely wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody really anticipated that they would name Wolford the starter. He's going to start the game, and then after literally one drive with 0 passes thrown, they replace him for the second drive. I think that was fairly unpredictable, but it's the way it goes sometimes with DFS. Brian, how about you? How did you handle the John Wolford Baker Mayfield situation last night?
Yeah, that was a weird one. I did 10% Wolford, 3% Mayfield in the large $15 one. And I had 2 combos of both of them together. So obviously I wish that was flipped in hindsight, but I mean, when I when I was entering and I was looking, I'm like, he could play the whole game. Like they might go, Mayfield doesn't know what he's doing yet. Let's just stick with them. And then maybe if we're getting blown out, we'll give him some reps or something. I don't know. So I didn't hate it. I was also hoping 10% would be over the field and just people just didn't play at all or something like that. And I ended up taking 7th. And so although it sounds good with the DF payouts of, the last 2-3 years, it's not nearly enough to pay for the amount of entries I normally do. So And the Mayfield stack was what won. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yep.
So beat me by like 0.4 points or something like that, right? Typical showdown. So
was it your Mayfield lineup that you used?
No Mayfield in that one.
You're talking about in the lotto, in the large field one. You
the
took
500.
I missed that you took 7th there. Well, I guess congratulations ish. That
great.
sucks with the payout structure.
It's one of those.
Yeah, but
great. But yeah,
exactly right.
I mean, what are you gonna do? It's kind of a fun gamble. Like, because I pay attention more than the average person, but not as much as some of you crazy people. So it's like a little bit where the gamble is more even for me versus like where these guys who they have a much better feel of something that's going to happen. Like, I don't think anyone knew what was going to happen.
No, I thought that I didn't think that I knew what was going to happen, but I thought that the likeliest scenario was that John Wolfer was going to play the majority of. There were reports late that it was like John Wolfer is going to start. Baker Mayfield, they said, will play at some point. So it wasn't like he could play situationally like it had been earlier in the day. They did say he will play at some point, which gave me a little bit of pause, but I didn't back off by John Wolford exposure like I should have. Yeah, obviously we all wish we could have flipped off of the John Wolford, just put Baker Mayfield in there. In retrospect would have been pretty amazing, but what are you going to do? We'll get, hopefully one of us will take better than 7th place the next time out. Okay, people in chat talking about the painting behind me over here. Yes, my wife did that painting during a wine and painting session. There's like I don't know, is that like maybe a wine shop or something? They do like paint by numbers and drink wine, and my wife painted that, and I saw it in my basement and I was like, that's a really nice painting, and I didn't know that she had done it, and then I brought it up to her and I was like, I kind of want to put this up. Where did this come from? She's like, I painted that. So that's the story of the painting behind my right shoulder that people are talking about in chat. All right, let's move on and talk about this main slate a little bit. We'll start with just some general strategy questions, and I'll start with you, Steve. Do you have any like general thoughts about this slate? How does it differ from any other slate for you? You're going to handle this one, play it like you play most slates? Is it just a standard slate for you?
I think for the most part, it's pretty standard. I think the one thing that most stands out to me is the Minnesota-Detroit game being totaled so much higher than the rest of the slate. So most of the rest of the games are mid to low 40 totals, and that one's up at 51, 52 range. So I think that how you handle that game will be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That's the one with a really high total, and love that it involves my Vikings. I'm going to be watching the game. Maybe I'll just eat the chalk. I don't know. Hard to say what I'm going to do. Brian, how about you? Any other any strategy thoughts about this slate? Does it differ from any other slate for you?
No, not really. Same
Right.
game plan for me. Sorry, I wish I had something for you.
No, that's totally fine. I'm surprised I don't get that answer more
too.
often. I mean, it's a totally fair answer. You guys are successful NFL DFS players. Why switch it up? Yeah, that's pretty standard slate. It's only 10 games. I guess that's a little bit different from a lot of slates. We've got a lot of teams on bye this week. But yeah, for the most part, it looks like a pretty standard NFL slate. All right, let's talk some quarterbacks. Jump right into talking the quarterbacks. And let's look at the chalkier quarterbacks. Steve, I'll start with you again. Looking at the chalkier quarterbacks, is there any chalk that you're willing to eat at the quarterback position, or any big fades for you among the higher owned quarterbacks?
Yeah, so I think for me, it is going to really come down to that Detroit-Minnesota game. Right now, our ownership projections for those guys are not that crazy. So actually, they're not really crazy for anybody. So we have on DraftKings, we have Goff at 12%, as well as Cousins. Actually, both of those are at 12%, and then it just drops down to like 10% on Burrows and Hurts. And to me, those ownership rates are not that crazy at all for a game that is 51 total, and like I said, all the rest are in the mid 40s. And on top of that, like, these guys' prices are not that high either. So on Goff, we've got a DK price of 5,600 and 7,100 on FanDuel, and Cousins is 61 and 75. Those are really pretty cheap prices for a game such a high total. The game is in a dome. These are like the two worst defenses. That's why, they're two of the three worst. Lions rank second in yards allowed. Vikings are third. The Vikings have been quite lucky on their defense. So they only rank 15th and 15th, like right in the middle on touchdowns, like points allowed. But the yards are a lot more predictive. So everything kind of lines up for this being a high scoring game, and the prices are low. And I just think like the prices of their weapons are pretty good also. So to me, everything kind of aligns for, man, this is one of those games that I kind of feel like I am probably going to eat a lot of the chalk this week, I think.
Okay, 12% ownership, not enough to scare you off of that game.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I do think that might come up over the weekend as more and more people continue to talk about this game and see what those totals are. They're also like the top 2 stacks in our top stacks tool. But I think even if it comes up a little bit more from 12% to like say 15 or 16, I don't know that I'm like, because all the next options have a good amount of ownership too. It's not like we're going to see them up at like 20% and then like everyone else in kind of like 5. I don't think anything like that. So if, with how close everyone is, it just feels like to me, I kind of like to go this route.
Okay. And then did you have any fades there at the higher end of ownership?
On the fade side, so I think it's a little bit different on the sites. Like, I think Josh Allen against the Jets is too expensive on DraftKings. He's 8,300, and the Jets defense is quite good, and their offense is kind of mediocre. They've gotten a nice bump here lately with White at quarterback, but I just wonder, like, even if Buffalo gets out to a nice lead, which I don't know if they will or not. I think the Jets are pretty good. It just worries me that Josh Allen may not have the normal upside that he has in order to pay off that high salary of 8,300. On FanDuel, though, I think it's different because on FanDuel, you have a little bit more flexibility and you're able to pay up for some of those guys. So I'd probably go with him a bit more over on FanDuel and maybe not fade him quite as much there.
Okay. Sounds good. And Brian, how about you, starting with the higher owned quarterback, higher projected ownership, any that chalk that you're willing to eat and or fades? These are all obviously relative terms. We don't really have any chalk here, but just looking at the higher end, anybody that you like that you want to play and anybody that you want to fade here.
If the ownership stays like this, I'm going to have to be on the golf train. It looks like I'm like double the exposure, double the field. I think Steve's right though. Like 16% wouldn't shock me. Once maybe in the 19% range, like he's projecting pretty well right now, or maybe if the projections change for some reason, who knows? But those are both domes. I don't know if it's in Detroit or Minnesota, but they're both domes either way. But the guy up there that is looking like a legitimate actual fade, almost not playing him at all, is Hurts.
You're not playing Hurts. Okay.
Yeah, this is what my large field sim's telling me. I did one before the show using Osmo's numbers. So that's kind of scary. He's pretty good, but it's giving me no Hurts at 8% ownership. And if these ownership numbers change, that info will change. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm sticking with that golf train, and Hurts looks like a fade option. Burrow too is coming in under up there, if we're just talking these top 4 guys, and Allen is looking like an underplay too. Which
as of right
Steve
now,
already
you're at the end of the field.
Yeah,
as you always say, this is not your final crunch. Who knows?
They change. You know what I did? This might be an interesting talking point. Is I DM'd your buddy Blender 2 weeks ago. I go, okay, here's my ownership. Who's wrong here? Because you know how he adjusts manually.
Yeah.
He consumes all the content. And so I adjusted based off of his recommendations. And I meant to do it last week too, but I totally forgot while I was busy updating my stuff Sunday morning. And I don't know if he's going to give it to me every time, but I want to track him and see if there's like a major difference and if he has that much of an edge compared to, how I make ownership projections. And I don't know your guys' exact process, but I have a pretty good idea, and see if he actually can build up that that edge there. And the week I tracked him, he was 2-2-1 on his 5 recommendations. So
Okay.
Even money there. So I mean, you're going to need a large field to judge that, but you got to ask him on your next show. Are you tracking your adjustments, and what is your actual rank? And do you have an outside source that is verifying this? This process of yours.
I was gonna say, are you gonna start a site, Brian, where you're like calling out the people who give these ownership projections? You know, there are like those sites out there who are like rank the touts and like how accurate they are. Are you secretly doing this to Blender? Like you're gonna come out in a couple months and just publish all of his data?
It's the Blender files. I'm gonna release it on Twitter only. Internal DMs will be posted for public for trust and safety. Yeah. No, I think honestly, I would guess he does have an edge. He can, if he is consuming all the content, and he does, because he shows his podcast hours tracked, and it's like ridiculous. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and he crushes me in amount of hours consumed. I imagine he does have an edge there. And look, there's we know there's petty theft. There's people out there, Ricky D, and they make their own adjustments. And Steve, I think you make your own adjustments, even though you do the same way I do it, where you build from the ground up with a model. I still think you even change your stuff a little bit to suit what you think's right?
Yeah, not quite as much since I've been here, but I because I've made a lot of changes into the ownership model myself, so I do trust these a lot more. But so I think we're getting better. I do think you should post this record of who's most accurate, because I have a pretty good feeling that we would win out over most other sites. So that's what my internal records show, anyways.
Well, and I know I'm wasting time here. We're not talking about actual picks. Sorry, people. But the interesting thing there is kind of the idea behind using regressions and all this stuff like that is letting go of the idea that you could pick better, but also the fact that sometimes you're wrong, and that's where the unders happen, right? And so it's just using this whole process to kind of go sometimes it's over, sometimes it's under, but generally speaking, this is the best I could do. And so if you're not counting your misses, and you're only counting I was over on this, on Josh Allen this time, and I was right, I could predict ownership better than Stokastic, right? It's you got to track everything because it's all interconnected. And over time, what the regressions are saying is if we did this 100,000 times, it would be about 6.7% or something. Right. And so every model's different, and some models are better than others. So adding in that human element is totally fine, in my opinion. But, tracking it is key, and just picking. I'm not saying Blender's doing this, but I bet a lot of people are. They're going, I knew Burrow was going to be over. I knew it. I told you. Stokastic stinks, and it's okay, well, track that for a couple of years, and then come back and tell me you can beat the model.
And also do every player, because I think a lot of people, and I can do I can find individual players on most slates that I'm I think that this individual player is wrong, but I'm still using the ownership projections for every other player. And still, even when I'm picking individual players, I'm this is clearly wrong. I had the example last week with Jelani Woods. I saw we had him projected for 11% ownership. I was there's no way that's right. He's going to come in way higher than that after his big game last week on primetime TV. And then of course he came in at 10%, came in, I think actually right about where we were projected. So yeah, it's really hard to do ownership. And I think we obviously, the team here, not we, I don't do the ownership projections. The team here does a great job, including Steve, with the ownership projections. And Brian, I want you to know that you are safe here to talk about strategy, to talk about all of these other elements. Marcos Amparo immediately responds, we don't want picks, we want this conversation. Carlos Manzo adds, oh yeah, fuck this. Our audience loves this kind of discussion in general. So we're safe.
Those guys are Lulz guys though. So they're biased.
That's true. But I think that's generally the audience. People come to this show in particular. They come for, the really smart guests that we have on. So they want to hear some of these conversations, but don't worry guys. We will talk about the slate as well. We'll move on now. Brian, you asked, you said you didn't know where the Vikings game against Detroit is. It's in Detroit this weekend. I had forgotten. As you said it, I was I should know this. I'm a Vikings fan. And then of course, Detroit is favored despite the Vikings having such a better record. It's pretty crazy. Detroit is favored. The Vikings are obviously going to crush them. But we'll move on to some contrarian picks. Somebody already brought up, and Brian, I'll stick with you. Tyler Huntley, do you have any interest in playing Tyler Huntley this weekend against Pittsburgh? Looking like he's not going to be very highly owned.
I have 0% in here, and let me make sure I have him in my player pool, but I do. Yeah, so the sim did not like him. I don't know why, but here, let's take a look here. We had him at his mean at 16.14. These are just today, by the way, so don't hold me to 16.14 median, ceiling of 56.52. In 30,000 sims. That seems kind of like a low ceiling, actually, but maybe that's it.
Okay, so just not showing a high ceiling in your sims, so not getting there.
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly why it's telling me this, but yeah, I have 0%.
Steve, do you want to add any insight on Tyler Huntley? Do you think you're going to be playing any this weekend?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like the problem is Jared Goff is 5,600 and Huntley is 5,500, and then the same on FanDuel, it's like 71 versus 7,000. So that runs into a problem pretty quickly for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as Hannah Banana says, Huntley runs and did quite well when Jackson was out the last few times. That's true. It's Will Sue won the Millie Maker with Huntley last year. So I know that he
and he was like 3% owned or something too. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But in general, he's 3% owned because typically he doesn't show such high upside. So maybe not necessary on this slate. If he's not coming up in your sims, that's probably a good indication that he's not the best play on the slate. The Ravens do have a 17.25 implied team total. So just maybe not the best spot for Huntley this weekend. But let's get into some contrarian plays that you guys do like. Brian, I'll start with you. Do you have any more contrarian options at quarterback that you're a fan of this weekend?
So that's my number one guy, and if anyone looks at my lamps week in, week out, it's probably not a surprise. It's Trevor Lawrence. So if he sticks around this 3% range, I'll be way over that, like 25% or so.
Okay. And somebody in chat was just saying that Trevor Lawrence might be questionable. I'm trying to remember if there was an injury there, but
that could influence this too, because like the ownership could be low because he's questionable, and it'll pop him up once he's okay. And also my sim doesn't know he's hurting. Right. Okay. So that could change things, but here at Friday at 10:30 real America time, he's my guy.
Yeah. And so we actually just got an update. I just searched Twitter and I see an update right away. Jonathan Jones reporting and NBC Sports Edge saying as well, Jaguars QB Trevor Lawrence expected to practice today in a limited capacity after did not practice the last 2 days with a toe injury. Would imagine he'll be listed as questionable with the expectation that he'll start Sunday versus the Titans. So this is, I think, just one guy's opinion that he's expecting him to start, but at least he's practicing today. So that is a good sign. Steve, I'll throw it to you. Any other contrarian quarterbacks that you want to talk about?
Yeah, this one's not going to be a very fun one, I don't think, but Russell Wilson is rating at just a couple percent owned. Denver is our number 4 play in the top stack tool, and a top value percent of 7.8% and a top stack percent of 3.2%. At this low ownership, I think that looks pretty good, because not only are you getting him at that top stack percentage at that rate similar to his ownership, he's so much cheaper than all the other players as well. So he's popping up a fair amount. I think that sounds pretty gross to me to play him, but I mean, it feels like against the Chiefs are probably going to build up a lead. Now, granted, Denver has a good defense, so it may not be super easy, but Mahomes is the best QB in the league. So it feels like if anyone's going to move it on Denver, it's probably going to be him. And if they're going to force him to actually throw a little bit more, I think he looks like a pretty interesting option. You could stack him with quite a few options, actually. So if you stacked him with, for instance, Dulcich or potentially Kendall Hinton, who's been playing pretty much every snap and has been scoring around 10 every week, and that's even without getting a touchdown. If you just get a touchdown from Wilson to Hinton or Dulcich, then, I mean, basically you've kind of got your stack covered, and then you have a lot higher chance to hit with other players like Justin Jefferson, for instance. So Wilson may not have thrown more touchdowns than bathrooms yet so far this season, but maybe this is the week that he kind of starts to gain some ground there.
I'm so glad that you're a sicko like me, Steve, because it is obviously disgusting. Steve and I both understand that this is a disgusting play. He's been bad all year. We're not saying that he's a great quarterback. We're saying that maybe he can get it done one week he should be passing for high volume against this Chiefs defense. It's not a great defense. And it just takes, as Steve said, one touchdown probably gets him there. Maybe he gets two for, I think, maybe the first time all year. Just reading the chat though, Big Ritter says, I'm done with Wilson. Jojo Pukey says, did he say Wilson? Terrifying. Rants, don't play Broncos. Everybody in chat is saying this is a terrible play. And yeah, that's what everybody thinks. Neither of us is saying that we love Russell Wilson, think that he is a great quarterback, but he's coming in so low owned in such a great spot, both from the Chiefs defense is not great, but also from just they're going to need to be probably passing to keep up with the Chiefs offense. So it's about as great of a spot as it could be for a guy like Russell Wilson coming in. We have him projected for 3.4% ownership, 7.8% chance of being the top value stack. Plenty of reason to play some Russell Wilson this weekend.
I think one thing I want to mention here really quick too is if they are behind by a lot, which it's not a guarantee by any chance that that'll be the case, but if they are behind by a fair amount, just look at like how bad in these last two primetime games Mayfield looked in the first half and Brady looked in the first half. Then the other teams went into like this defense prevent mode, and those guys kind of just like lit up against those type of defenses and came back and won the game. Now, I don't think Wilson, we can't expect him to come back and win the game in that match fashion, but I mean, that's a way that you could very easily see an underperforming quarterback get some stats against like that type of defense.
Right, exactly. So I want to ask you one more question about the Russell Wilson potential stack, Steve, because as you said, like maybe he throws one touchdown to get there. Are you planning? Do you think you would rather single stack or double stack with Russell Wilson specifically?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm hoping that he would throw two touchdowns, to be honest. But if he hits one to either Hinton or Dulcich, like that in and of itself, I think would get those players there, and hopefully you get maybe a touchdown to someone else. But I'm probably going to stack him mostly with one, I would say, one of those two. But I mean, I think you could potentially do it with two. I think you also would run it back with a Chiefs player, because like what I was mentioning there is you would very likely, he's going to get there more in a game where the Chiefs score a lot and he's coming back, I think, instead of like building up a lead. So I think maybe, and then you can also, because he's so cheap and his stack partners are so cheap, you could run it back with Kelsey, who's not necessarily easy to put in your stacks with Mahomes.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good call. Bringing it back with somebody from the Chiefs who are relatively cheap. Of course, if you do double stack this, man, that's a cheap stack. If you do both Hinton and Dulcich in particular, that's a incredibly inexpensive stack. So you can do a lot with the rest of your lineups. Yeah, definitely an interesting one. Brian, you think you're going to get there at all with Russell Wilson?
Yeah, it's gross, right? But I'm looking like it's going to be an over the field for Wilson, and I think though I'm going to be a little more stacky than with him from the sound of it than Steve's going to be. The majority of those are like three players from the game in them. So, okay. Because I think it's probably because I have a lot of Dulcich right now. So,
yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I don't like it. This is large field though, folks. So
yeah. I mean, that's what we're here about, right? This is a tournament show. We're here to talk about some of the grosser options. That's the fun of this show, is trying to find the grosser options that other people don't want to play that maybe will have a shot at succeeding. Steve, did you have any other contrarian quarterbacks that you want to talk about that you feel like you need to talk about?
I think I made people sick enough with Wilson, so I think that's good.
Brian, any others you want to throw out there?
Oh, God. All right. I'll do one more. The only other guy I'm over on in this really low level here is Kenny Pickett. So I know he's got small hands, folks, but occasionally you got to play these guys.
I was actually about to bring up Kenny Pickett because Greg Bianconi, I'm probably mispronounced that. He said maybe Pickett with Pickens. Do you think that's a good stack for you with Kenny Pickett, Brian?
I mean, I don't have the direct combo right in front of me.
Okay.
But I'm sure that would probably be one of them. Let me check here how much Pickett I got.
Seems like good enough combo.
Yeah, he's going to be in a couple of those combos. I'm not going to have a ton of Pickett. I'm going to have more Wilson, but I mean we're looking at the bottom of the barrel here. I would as of today, I'd be over on Pickett.
Okay, yeah, this is again Friday. Things could change between now and the weekend.
I think Pickett makes a lot of sense in the same way as Wilson too. Like if you just get a touchdown to Deontay Johnson, especially Deontay Johnson has no touchdowns this year. He has by far the most catches without a touchdown this year. And let's just say this is the week they finally get a touchdown, then that pays off that stack. And you can get Diggs and all these other guys who you want to play.
Right. That's now I have more time to look into it. That's exactly what it's looking like, more Deontay Johnson as just a good play in general. And Freiermuth too, over the Kenny, the Pickett, George Pickett. Yeah. So,
okay. Yeah. A lot of, and none of these guys are all that expensive either. So it's also a relatively inexpensive stack. One more thing I'll touch on while we're still on quarterbacks. Ryan Rienebaum asks, can we discuss single entry strategies for DraftKings real quick? I only play one lineup per week and would love a great rundown from these two goats. Brian, do you have any, I know that you run your sims like based on the actual contest, right? Do you see any big differences or have any big differences in the way you play for single entry versus, when you're MMEing?
I don't take enough time for single entry as I should, honestly, because it's not usually a huge part of all my volume, but I do make it's size specific. So, and I think that's important, is there's a big difference between 170,000 entry milli maker and if you're playing like a 5,000 entry single. Like, you do not need to be as contrarian as we're talking about on a lot of these plays when you're there. And another obvious one too, that the industry hasn't really picked up on yet, or maybe they picked up on it, but the content isn't out there, is the ownership's different. So like usually the value plays get picked more. They're like, so like if let's say they're 35% projected in the milli, they could be up to like 60 or 70 in a single entry. And so if you have like a bottom up process, like Steve and I have, you could make that adjustment there and then affect your overall entries that you put into the single. If I was like, another piece of advice, because there's not a huge difference, but like a single entry or a 3-max, if I was doing 3-max, I wouldn't make the entries the same, like, with like one difference. I would make them very different, if anything, within reason. You don't want to lose 20 points of projection or however you value your lineups. But I would make them, different from each other before I just like entered. Like if I sorted by projection, right? Let's say you use FC and you sort by projection. A lot of times the combos are very similar, and you're putting a lot of risk, from like a portfolio standpoint into this 3-man. So I would like at least look at those and go, okay, this one's got 6 players different or something like that, and go, and the projection's about the same. All right, fine, good enough. Something like even that level could kind of help you balance out the risk over time. I don't know. I'm not like the single entry expert here, so that's about as good as I got.
No, I think that was really helpful. So you're not likely to do a one, like if you're doing a 3-max, that's obviously a little bit different than a single entry, because this is not possible in a single entry. But like in a 3-max, you'd be more likely to do, you're not going to do 1v1s. You're not going to do lineups that are like really close to each other. You're more likely to do like 4v4, 6v6, as long as the projection is still close enough. You're going to be, trying to diversify your portfolio a bit.
Yeah, if I have the time. Because I'm sure someone's going to look through my lineups like, you on January 17th, 2007, you put the same lineups in.
No, our audience would never, Brian. They're not doing that. Steve, did you have anything you want to add about single entry in particular?
I think Brian covered that pretty well.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, then we will move on, talk about some running backs. But first, let me tell you guys that we have a great offer for new users only. I know Mike just posted this in the YouTube chat. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days, free projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, zero risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video, also in chat on YouTube. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. All right, let's move on and talk about some running backs. Steve, I'll throw it to you first. Talking about the running backs at the high end of ownership, is there any chalk that you're willing to eat or any major fades for you?
Yeah, so on the chalk that I'm willing to eat, I think I'm going to probably go pretty high on Derrick Henry. So Henry's price is down a couple ticks after a couple of bad games here recently. His workload has kind of been limited a bit, and the total is only 41.5. But we always know that Henry has a ton of upside. The last couple weeks before this recent downturn, he had been as consistent as it comes throughout the year. He hadn't had a huge game like last year where he, scores like 45 or 50 every other week. But whether you believe in it or not, I mean, there's the narrative that he kind of doesn't wear out as much at the end of the season. He's another year older, so maybe that's not quite the case anymore. But I think this is like a pretty good chance that, at a minimum, he's not worn out more than other people. And I haven't seen him getting injured or anything like that. And I think this is a pretty good matchup. I know we talked about Trevor Lawrence being kind of interesting, and I think this is a game that has a little bit sneaky shootout potential, and at that price point looks pretty good.
Okay, so Derrick Henry against the Jaguars defense is somebody that you're going to be overweight to the field on. How about any fades of these higher owned running backs?
So I think I think this is a little bit site specific as well. So both CMC and Saquon Barkley they're pretty expensive on DraftKings and they look a little bit more affordable on FanDuel. So those look like they're getting quite a bit of ownership on DraftKings. I don't know that I can get to them. I think one of the major reasons why I get to both of them a little bit more on FanDuel is, one, you have a little bit more salary available to you. And then two, just in general, running backs are a little bit better flex plays on FanDuel because of how important touchdowns are, and running backs are a little bit more likely to get touchdowns versus the wide receivers and tight ends. So I think I lean slightly towards those two guys as being fades on DraftKings, and maybe not quite as much on FanDuel. If I look at FanDuel, let's see who is maybe fade over there a little bit more. Maybe Dalvin Cook. He's got a big price difference there. He's 7,300 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel, whereas like Christian McCaffrey, for instance, 8,500 on both sites. So if you're like thinking about ways to diversify your portfolio, you could just be more likely to play Dalvin Cook on DraftKings and play McCaffrey on FanDuel. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about there.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Take advantage where the salary makes more sense for you. It's a really nice price tag for me on Dalvin Cook, but I'm also a Vikings homer, so I'm just more inclined to want to play a 7,300 Dalvin Cook against the Lions. He doesn't look all that amazing in the boom bust tool. Actually has negative leverage for us on DraftKings, coming in at 13.5% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal. So some negative leverage there, but he's Dalvin Cook against the Lions. Certainly, the upside is high there. Brian, I'll ask you the same question. Running backs at the high end of ownership that you're willing to eat the chalk, and any fades for you.
I'm going to echo some of the same things. So Henry is an over the field as of today for me. And Cook as well. But the thing that with Cook is, I think what it's happening here is it's just this Detroit Minnesota game right now, because I'm also way over on Swift. So it just has to be this correlation stacking. This game is bumping these guys up, and they're fairly good plays. Jamal Williams is still playing, it looks like, right? So Swift is still risky.
Yep.
With the TD vulture there, but those are three of the higher owned My three highest own, actually, Henry, Swift, and Latavius Murray. He's not as chalky right now as those other guys, but I generally don't fade running backs as aggressively as some other positions. I mean, I should say the simulations I use anyways don't tell me to fade them as aggressively, but one guy I am up here is Tony Pollard.
Okay, you're going to be underweight to the field on Tony Pollard.
Yeah, by quite a bit.
Okay, and then I'll ask you even before we get to the more contrarian options, do you like Ezekiel Elliott at all? Are you playing the other running back in that game for the Cowboys?
Just slightly under the field.
Okay, so not somebody that you're loving this weekend either. Yeah, somebody in chat just said if these guys love Russell Wilson, I bet they're also going to love Latavius Murray, and it sounds like you're getting to some Latavius Murray, Brian.
Yeah, triple the field right now.
Wow.
30, 37, 38%.
Wow. Yeah, we've got him at 14% projected ownership. That's a stand on Latavius Murray. 5,200 though. The price is right. Obviously, the same environment that we talked about with Russell Wilson, where they're going to be playing against the Chiefs, relatively bad defense. So it's quite the stand. Well,
who doesn't like putting all this money on a journeyman running back who's on his 18th team? I mean.
Exactly. You got to love playing those journeymen.
With Russell Wilson as quarterback to boot. Like, why not?
I'm in. What could possibly go wrong here? Yeah.
I mean, he went over 4 yards per carry once in his last 6 games. So, I mean, it looks pretty good.
All right. Good for him.
I also like Latavius Murray as well. So I'm not going against that.
All right. So we're all playing Latavius Murray. Steve, did you have any contrarian running backs that you want to throw into the mix here?
So I think not as much. Kind of like Brian was saying, I don't tend to go with the contrarian running backs quite as much. I think Latavius Murray is semi-contrarian, so I think that's a good place to go. And then also, I think one I brought up last week that worked out pretty well was Pacheco. I think that's a pretty good option. Although, his ownership has come up quite a bit on our last run. So he's pretty popular, I suppose. So maybe he's not as good this week as he was last week. But I do think if he scores a couple of touchdowns in a game that that they kind of control, I think that could be pretty interesting. And let's see. I think also the one that hasn't worked out all season long, essentially, and I just keep riding with him anyways, is Dameon Pierce. And against the Houston offense is just so bad, but he continues to get lots of opportunities every week. So as long as you continue to get opportunities, there's a good chance that eventually he might do something with them. So I don't think anyone wants to click on his name anymore. Kind of the same vein that they don't want to play Wilson. So I think you can get him at a pretty good ownership, maybe even lower than what we're projecting right now. Yeah,
it's certainly possible that Dameon Pierce, at this point, he's just been too bad for too long. Last week, I played a lot of Dameon Pierce last week, and in the first half, he was on pace for like 120 yards, and I was like, man, this is finally, it's going to work out here, and then they stopped using him, so hopefully that will not be the case this week, and we can play him and maybe get to that 100-yard bonus, maybe a touchdown even, get there. Brian, did you have any contrarian running backs that you wanted to throw in the mix?
Yeah, like running backs more kind of like NBA, where like if you have like your whole line's made of 3%ers, you're probably dead. It's not as bad as NBA, but so like I don't really have any of these like really low owned guys over at all. So like the closest would be Deontay Foreman at 9.5%. Projected own, I got 17.5% of them. So okay. double field or whatnot. And a lot of this stuff is game based. So the Sims liking the Minnesota Detroit game in Jacksonville, Tennessee. We already talked about Henry. But if ETN and Lawrence are both healthy, then I'll be double field on ETN too.
Okay. So here's one that I think is going to be maybe tougher for you guys to ask, because Brian, you probably haven't run Sims for this, so maybe I'll ask Steve this one. Kenneth Walker currently is listed in our tools, Steve. In the Boom Bust tool, we have Kenneth Walker. I think we're assuming that he's going to play. I think that it's likely that he doesn't play this weekend. Do you think you would have interest in any Seattle running back in the event that Kenneth Walker is not available this weekend?
Yeah, so let me pull up here. So it looks like DJ Dallas got quite a bit of run last week when Kenneth Walker was injured. And so of the rushing attempts, looks like DJ Dallas had 45%, Tony Jones had 32, and that was with Kenneth Walker getting 14. So it does look like they're leaning to DJ Dallas a bit, but that looks pretty even. Certainly they'll have thought about it a little bit more this week, so they might lean a little bit more heavily towards DJ Dallas than that. I don't think it looks super clear, but that's a good offense. And DJ Dallas was also involved in. It looks pretty split on the passing down. So yeah, I don't know that I'd have a ton of either one of them, but I do think it makes sense to have some of probably both of them. Actually, let's see what their prices are at.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in a matchup with the Panthers, who are 22nd against the rush. The Seahawks are favored by 4 points currently. Actually, I haven't updated that since Wednesday, so it's possible it's not quite not 4 points currently, but probably pretty close to that. Seems like just the matchup maybe they'd want to run. So I thought these guys could be interesting if Kenneth Walker's out. They're relatively cheap. Travis Homer might also be back in the mix this weekend, so it's definitely murky.
Yeah, I think you're right. Homer will probably be involved as well. So it's a tricky one. But their prices are pretty good, though. So I think it might be worth a shot in a game that can score some points.
Okay. Yeah, Mike just said, guys, please do hit that like button. I know I asked for it at the beginning of the show. Not getting a ton of likes, but got a couple goats here. So please hit the like button for us. M. Bruno asked, what is Pacheco's ownership now? We've got him currently projected for about 10% ownership. Somebody else, Adam Baum-Mother brought up Joe Mixon. He is a relatively chalky running back. I think we got Joe Mixon at like 20%, so not a very 22% projected ownership on Joe Mixon, so relatively chalky there. But yeah, it sounds like, that's been a common theme on this show, is a lot of the guests, and Alex says the same thing, like at running back, as Brian says, it's a little bit closer to NBA. Like you just kind of eat the chalk at running back because it's it's a more projectable position because it's so volume based as opposed to wide receiver. Obviously there are those guys who you can generally count on to get some volume, but it's a lot more volatile than running back. So yeah, I think we've covered all of the probably more interesting contrarian pieces at running back. We've talked about the chalk a little bit. I guess I'll just ask Steve, did you have anything else that you want to say about any running back here?
I don't think anyone else stands out too much one way or the other. Like Mixon, I think is a fine play. I'll probably be slightly over the field on him in that matchup. I think that could be a high scoring one, but I think most of these other guys are kind of like, solid plays, just not taking a stand one way or the other. Okay.
And then Brian, same to you. Do you have any thoughts, any additional thoughts on any running backs, or should we move on?
Slightly over on Mixon as well. I just looking at this, it seems like James Cook's ownership seems too high for me. I'm not the best at just eyeballing this stuff, but I didn't know he was worthy of 8% ownership. And in general too, just about the ownership at RB, like 14% is not that chalky for running backs, right? Yeah. And so I think it's just kind of a different way to look at it when you're thinking about that position.
Yeah, and James Cook, I think that he just in the last game he got so much more run than people are used to. So people are now like, sweet, he's taking it on, the exciting rookie. People want to play him. So I guess I can see why the field might get there. We got questions about J.K. Dobbins. Brian, do you have any J.K. Dobbins currently in your lineup set?
Well, I did look really quick. The Seattle guys, I had DJ Dallas and Tony Jones Jr. as the main guys getting the ball. So in Baltimore, I have Edwards, Drake, and Proche going. Wait, he's on Baltimore still, right?
Yeah, he is still on Baltimore.
Okay. So I didn't have and Richard getting a couple carries too, maybe 0.1 carries, but no Dobbins. Is he questionable or something?
I'm actually not sure. I'm looking him up right now. I'm trying to find his latest, I guess.
And so, this run is with him not playing. So take that, whatever I say there. If you're a Dobbins backer, if he plays, that would change this completely.
Yeah, it does. Look, the latest that I'm seeing on Twitter, I think, is suggesting that J.K. Dobbins is likely to be back this weekend, but not a sure thing. We don't currently have him in the boom bust tool, so I guess we will have to update that if we get more news that he is trending toward playing. Brian, you brought up those Seattle running backs. So do you have any interest in either of them? You said that you broke down who you think's getting the carries. Do you think you're going to be playing either of them this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, even if I did, I don't think it matters. I think we need more info still to Sunday, and like hopefully someone can get a better feel. It was just like this was a little bit more DJ Dallas getting the carries, and so I think I had 1% of them in this run. So, but come Sunday, if he's the bell cow back and everyone says it, that could totally switch, right? If he's now projected for 14 fantasy points or something. I'd probably be getting a whole bunch of them, but at this point in time, same thing with Baltimore too. Like it's running simulations at this point for some of this stuff is kind of pointless, because what really at this point is probably like 60% Dobbins is going to play, and then you have to like send the times he's not going to play, and then that really affects the sims going like, okay, well then this is a pretty bad play. They're all bad plays on this team because we don't know the information, when in reality on Sunday morning we're really going to probably know what's happening, and the whole world will know. So right. Then that you run it then. So like it's kind of pointless doing my process for that specific situation, the Seattle and Baltimore, but
right.
Yeah, 1% Dallas, and then really nothing from Baltimore.
Okay. Yep, that's a fair assessment that you're going to be just having to see what comes up, what news we get. If things change closer to lock, that's obviously going to change the equation quite a bit. But yes, John is pointing out J.K. Dobbins is going to return from IR this week. He's 4K. I don't know. Maybe I'll talk about him on the strategy show tomorrow once we have hopefully a little bit more information. It's just kind of hard to say right now what we can really expect from J.K. Dobbins. So we can move on from running backs, talk about some wide receivers. But first, let me tell you about our sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks offers daily prop-based contests. There are no Sharks optimizers or mass entries on Prize Picks. You just build a 5-player lineup and you can net up to 10x your entry fee. Use your knowledge of multiple sports with cross-sport entries. Perfect time of the year to do so. We've got NFL, NBA, NHL, lots of other sports going on right now. So a good time to use your knowledge of multiple sports. Click the link in the description below to get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit with Prize Picks. All right, let's talk some wide receivers. Steve, I'll start with you once again. Wide receivers looking at the higher end of ownership. Is there anybody, any chalk that you're willing to eat, or any major fades for you at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, so the chalk that I'm most interested in is Justin Jefferson. I've been on Jefferson quite a bit all season long, I would say. I feel pretty confident going with him each week. He's in this game that we've talked about quite a bit here in Detroit with the high total, and I think that makes a lot of sense. He's had 6 games that he scored over 28 points this year, and 2 more games that he scored in the kind of the upper teens. Those aren't the 6 games that is 28 points for him is kind of like the range that I'm looking for of really being able to be a slate winner at his price point. And then those other ones are not really going to ruin your week. So he's pretty much like as consistent as you can get. And this is even a better situation than he's been in most of the time. So he is pretty chalky right now, and I think he is still a pretty good play even at that level of chalkiness. So I think I'm going to be over the field on him. The one I'm not quite as sure about right now is Amon-Ra St. Brown. So his ownership is pretty high. He's the highest by a pretty wide margin, and I don't know. I mean, like, I almost feel like it might even get higher potentially as we keep going. He's had back-to-back weeks as chalk, and he's crushed it on those weeks, and he's in the best game situation. So it kind of feels like when you are chalk and you really crush also people are really quick to click on that again, like since he's did you so well in the past. So I feel like that he could get even higher owned, which starts to worry me a little bit. And I know I like this game a lot. So maybe one way I might get different is going with all the other players in this game and fading St. Brown. That hasn't worked probably hardly any this year. But I think that might be a route that I'm going to take.
Yeah, chalk has been going crazy this year. So that's hopefully you can pray that maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown is not going to hit once again. But that's a good point. He was chalk last week. He did great as chalk, so probably just going to get steamed up even more. And once again, another juicy matchup with the Vikings. Yeah, I think we can count on a pretty good amount of ownership there. Brian, looking at the high end of ownership, any chalk you're willing to eat or major fades for you?
Yeah, my spreadsheet is blocked by the camera in like spots, and so some of the names are only hyphenated. And I saw A. Brown is like my top chalky guy. I'm like, Antonio Brown, I don't think he's playing this week. Yeah. But and then I have to look underneath, and it's like, so Amon is actually, I kind of have the Sims telling me kind of the opposite of what Steve was thinking about doing, at this time, which is a lot more Brown and actually under on Justin Jefferson. And that kind of makes sense to me a little bit. If like you could eat the chalk, but differentiate a little bit there, so I guess that feels right. And like, you could say the same thing if you did it the other way, right? And you had a whole bunch of Jefferson and went under on Brown. I think both of these guys, putting my Blender HD hat on for a second, would it surprise you if it was like 32% Brown and 28% Jefferson, no. when you open your app on Sunday? It wouldn't surprise me either. But I'm kind of fading a lot of this chalk currently. So like Jefferson under, Diggs under, Jamar Chase under, CeeDee Lamb under on all these wide receivers. And so like wide receiver, now we're getting more baseball territory, right? If we're making that analogy again, like we did with running back, where I will take some stands and go over on some low owned guys and under on some high owned guys. Right. So this stuff doesn't surprise me. I don't know what we'll look at on Sunday. And so I'm like double and a half the field on Thielen. And so, to me, this makes perfect strategic sense, right? So you fade Jefferson, you throw the run back and Thielen, you play a bunch of the chalky game, but you're a little bit different. Is what I'm assuming the Sims thinks is profitable right now come Sunday.
And natural leverage there to play Adam Thielen as opposed to the chalkier Justin Jefferson. You just get natural, obviously, leverage on all that Jefferson ownership.
Yeah, and you could do the same thing with Cousins, right? And reverse it. And just like kind of what Steve was getting at.
DJ Chark or Jamison Williams instead of
Brown.
Don't talk about DJ Chark. That's who I was going to talk about.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem with this.
Not going to bring him up. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Steve, but I'm going to let Brian go first this time. I'm going to let you go first on everything. Brian, so you already brought up Adam Thielen as one contrarian option. Did you have any others that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I really want to bring up DJ Chark. No, I'm kidding. But one more guy there in that game, Josh Reynolds, slightly over in this Detroit, Minnesota game. But so we're looking for contrarian here. Yep. Is like, it's, I don't know what my threshold is, but let's like in the 7% range, I'm well over on Zay Jones. I think he was banged up last week, right? So that could change, but in that range right there, that 6% range with Judy, Deontay Johnson, Zay Jones, and Godwin, even DK Metcalf. It's not super chalky, but that's kind of like, besides Josh Reynolds, who I mentioned already, and these like super low owned guys, Tyler Boyd maybe with your Burrow stacks makes some sense. Isaiah McKenzie down there with your Allen stacks, but a little LaVisca is popping up here, Carolina. Yeah. But that's what's telling me. Oh, Juju Smith. There we go. He's pretty low owned. 4%, got triple the field there. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good number of names. I'm glad that I was hoping you were going to name every wide receiver so that Steve could not bring up an original wide receiver. Yeah, you got to a lot. So we're making it tough on Steve. But Steve, I'll go to you now. Who do you like among the contrarian wide receivers?
I think a lot. I do like almost all of those guys. I was as Brian was mentioning them, I was kind of going through. Oh, yep, over on him. Yep, over on him. So I think those are a lot of good advice players. I did want to bring up DJ Chark, so thank you for that. He's finally getting more healthy now, and he came back in week 11. He played 19% of the routes that week. He played 83 the following week, 93 after that. And is pretty much Khalif Raymond went down to only 22% of the snaps last week. And Josh Reynolds is, I was unsure about how that would split out, but it was DJ Chark that was clearly the guy there. And he almost broke 100 yards already. So I feel like he's getting close to healthy. He's one of those guys that makes a lot of sense as a pivot against some of those higher owned guys in this game. And he's also cheap to help you get some of those other guys. So I like going that route. And another one that I kind of wanted to mention is Michael Gallup. So Gallup hasn't really had a good game since 2020. I looked up and it's been a while, but his price is still really cheap. He's getting a ton of playing time. If you stack him up with in that Dallas game, I mean, who else would you like to go against than Houston? Maybe the Lions, I suppose. But this is a chance that, it sounds pretty gross to go with him, but if things go right, I mean, his price is so cheap on both sites that I think he could be in a spot to, if he just scores a touchdown in a game that, the Cowboys should be putting up a good amount of points, I think he could easily be in a winning lineup.
Okay, Michael Gallup. All right. So I think we've covered a lot of the more contrarian wide receivers, and we are already a little bit over time. So we will move on and talk about some tight ends and defenses. But first, I want to say, guys, if Prize Picks is not available in your state, I already told you about the great deal we have from Prize Picks, but if it's not available in your state, there's a good chance that BetMGM is available, and we've got another great offer for you. You'll get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10 on BetMGM. That's every tool on Stokastic for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher. It's a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description or in chat, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when the bet settles, BetMGM will hit you up with how to get your free subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all that, you also get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you win the bet. You get whatever you get for winning the bet. If you lose the bet, though, you still get your $1,000 back, or whatever entry you put in. You get your money back in free bets. It's legit free money and a free subscription to the best DFS tools out there. I should remind you, make sure that you use the link or we won't be able to track your entry. So do use that link to get this offer. It's a great one. All right, let's move on and talk about some tight ends. Brian, I'll start with you on the tight ends. We can talk about the chalkier, higher owned tight ends. Is there any chalk that you're willing to eat, or any major fades for you among the higher owned tight ends?
I'm gonna eat Dulcich, Kelsey, and fade Hockenson. It looks
all
like
right
from the
concise.
chalk there.
Dulcich, Kelsey, good. Not playing a lot of TJ Hockenson. You don't believe in revenge, Brian?
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Check that.
Yeah.
Hockenson, well over.
Bump him up 10%.
Yeah, that's
Got
right. Okay, Steve, I'll ask you the same question, just looking at the higher end of ownership. Who you playing, who you fading?
I like those two, Dulcich and Kelsey. A little bit more mixed on Hockenson, but I think that is a really good plan with those guys. Kelsey makes a lot of sense in the run back fashion that I mentioned earlier, so I like going that route, especially on FanDuel. His price is pretty affordable over there at $8,000. A little bit harder to get to him on DraftKings at $7,600, but I think that's a good spot, and I'll definitely go with him. Dulcich, we talked about him earlier with Wilson, so I think that's a really good stack as well, and opens up a lot of stuff for you. Who I'm going to fade? I don't have a huge fade. I guess I would probably say Hockenson as well. Actually, we don't have a huge amount of chalk at tight end, so I think that's what we're going to go with.
Okay. And then Brian, I'll go back to you with the contrarian tight ends. Any contrarian tight ends that you're planning on playing this weekend?
Yeah, so I don't get any of the 1 or 2%. As close as I have is Evan Ingram, and this is probably more lineup based, stacking with Lawrence, correlation based, but 3 or 4x the field of Evan Ingram.
Evan Ingram, okay. Yeah, that's sorry, I'm talking to Mike here. Steve, I'm gonna go back to you now with contrarian options. Anybody that you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I'll go on the opposite side there with Hooper. So I think Hooper makes a really good run back in that Jacksonville game. If you want to stack with Lawrence, you can run him back. He's at 2,900. I don't think he's really done much this year, so I don't know that he has a ton of upside. I'm not going to go heavy on him. I'm actually kind of surprised that he's 6% for how poor he's done this year. I guess that kind of tells you how bad these low end options are. But basically, you're just kind of hoping that he has one of those performances that, none of the big chalk or more expensive like tight ends do well. And I think he could, get there with his low price that helps you get some other guys in.
Nice. Okay. Any other tight ends that you want to talk about, Steve?
I think one other one that could make sense is kind of in the same light as Gallup is Dalton Schultz. So he's kind of in that mid-tier ownership, and he's pretty cheap, and he's playing against Houston. So I think that those all combine together to give you a lot of good lineups with him.
Okay, and then Brian, same question. Any other tight ends you want to touch on?
I'm over in that mid-tier there with Freiermuth. And I guess the flyer I would do, like the 1% or under, would be Cade Otton.
Cade Otton for the Bucks.
For the Bucks.
Yeah, with Cameron Braid out, he already seemed to be taking on a bigger role for the Bucks. Then of course he had a very nice game on, I think was it Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, one of these past showdown slates. Cade Otton was looking great. So yeah, it's definitely will be interesting, especially if Cameron Braid is out. But even with Cameron Braid playing, he had been taking on a bigger role. I like that call out. Okay, I think that will do it for tight ends. Let's just talk really quickly about defenses. If you guys have any opinions about defenses, Steve, I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts on any defenses that you're planning on taking any big stands on this weekend?
I don't know about a big stand. I don't see any defenses that are standing out too much. It looks like the Cowboys are pretty popular. I'll probably go under the field on them. I think that you're just going to be hoping there that maybe this game is low scoring and there's just no interceptions or touchdowns like that. And I think that would probably be fine to be able to get away from them. Plus they're pretty expensive. So I'll probably fade on them. One that I think is kind of interesting is on FanDuel is the Lions defense is all the way down at 3,100. We've talked a lot about that game from playing the offensive players on that game. There's going to be very few people going to the Lions just because they have a don't play your defense against the offense rule set up. So if that game goes the opposite way of what everyone is projecting, I think that's a interesting spot to go to. I'm not going to go heavy on that, but I think it's kind of an interesting one.
Okay, so Steve, along those lines, would you consider playing? Would you play the Detroit defense against any Vikings players, or do you have the same rule set where it's going to be 0 against your defense on a main slate?
I think it's possible, especially in that game. I think it's possible. I wouldn't want to stack up like a lot of players against him, but I think that you could, easily use like a, Chark or some of those type of players. Probably not like a Justin Jefferson or a full on stack or something, but maybe some of the lower owned players.
Okay. And then Brian, same question about defenses for you. Any defenses that you're taking big stands on or general thoughts this weekend?
Not really. Defenses are kind of been fairly efficiently owned, I think. I know it seems kind of crazy to say that with defense being so volatile. But you could kind of use defense, like I'll try to give something helpful at least, to like the single entry homeboy who asked the question. Mm-hmm. You could kind of use that in more of a portfolio useful way where, so like, let's say you're doing the 3 max again. You got your first entries, whatever your best lineup that you want to get in there. Well, then your next one, when you're putting your 4 or 6 different players in there, you could make it the defense of that quarter that was playing your quarterback in the first one. As long as it's a defense that's going to be played or something. So like I mentioned, like Kenny Pickett would be a contrarian stack. Well, then you could play the Ravens D in your other stack, in your 3 mix, and you kind of, so if Pickett gets destroyed, you could, maybe pick up some of those points with the Ravens and balance out your risk a little bit, stuff like that. It's defense. There's not a lot that you can predict there, but there it is semi-predictable. The problem is everyone kind of knows it at this point, and they know who are the bad defenses, what the Vegas lines are, and the ownership reflects it. So
yeah. So just diversifying your portfolio is kind of the general message there. And that's a really good point. Like in a 3 entry in particular, if you play, as you said, you gave the example, you play a quarterback in one of your lineups, play the defense that opposes that quarterback in a different lineup, and that's an easy way to kind of diversify your portfolio, especially obviously in those kind of more volatile game environments. Yeah, it's a really interesting approach. That's the kind of thing that I was hoping for when I asked you about defenses, not necessarily picks, but maybe general thoughts, and I think that's a very helpful one.
I don't think also another thing is I don't think you have to these days anyways just fade the chalk. I don't think that's a strategy that's winning strategy, where maybe it used to be a few years ago when defense would be 40% owned. You could just fade it, it's defense. But like for hand builders, I'm saying, like if your Sim's telling you something, fade it, of course. But if you're hand building, you're like, okay, that's the highest defense, automatic fade. I don't think that's really a winning strategy anymore. You could play some chalk defenses. It's not the end of the world. I think.
We've seen it work out plenty of times this year. So definitely has been proving true that you don't need to full fade the chalk defenses. Yeah, DFix says, who is this week's Cleveland? I'm just going to answer that one. Hopefully nobody puts up like 30 fantasy points from the defense position and just kills your lineup if you don't have them. But yeah, it's really hard to predict week to week. And we don't have anybody that's projected for like 40% ownership this weekend. So yeah, it's a tough question. I'll have to give it some thought and get back to you tomorrow, I guess. But let's move on to just close out with some top stacks, favorite stacks for this weekend. Talking large field GPP. Brian, who is your favorite stack? If you can just choose one for a large field GPP.
A Lawrence stack with Zay. How many guys do I have to put in it?
As many as you want.
Yeah, just as a Lawrence stack. So Lawrence and Zay Jones for sure, and then either Kirk or Ingram.
Okay. And then Steve, same question to you. Do you have a favorite stack for a large field GPP?
All right. So can I really go with Russell Wilson here? I don't know. I'll go. It's definitely worth a thought, but I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins with Justin Jefferson. Or you could do it with Thielen as well. I think that's fine. And then probably run it back with DJ Chark maybe and fade St. Brown. Do kind of that type of thing.
That's nice. Contrarian right there. Fade Jefferson and Brown in a Detroit stack.
That's very contrarian. That's what the show is all about.
All right.
Going as contrarian as possible. I think we've done a good job finding those contrarian stacks.
You know what? I'm not even going to play anyone in one lineup. How are you going to?
I like that. Nobody's going to do that. Well, some people will do that. Some people will reserve and then not enter a lineup. So you won't be alone. That actually will be kind of chalky.
They even dupe me when I do that strategy. Is what you're telling me?
There's nothing you can do. Sorry, Brian. Brian, thanks for coming on. This has been we've gone a little over, so sorry for keeping you past when I told you how long the show would go. Where can people find you? Any final thoughts?
Bric75.com is my website. Brian Hooper is my YouTube. I think if you type in Brian Hooper or Brick, you'll find me. And my Twitter is Brian Hooper __.
Okay. Yep. You can find Brian in lots of different places. And as you said, you don't have any plans necessarily for doing content until Pete comes back, but maybe you'll do a live stream or two just yourself.
No, I think I might try to just do me talking to somebody or something like that. Get a few conversations going. I don't know if I necessarily want to do all DFS though, so we'll see.
And will this be on your YouTube or just on your Twitch?
I'll just put it on mine.
My YouTube. Okay, cool. I'll tweet it out. Yeah,
if I do
look out for Bric's content. Again, follow him on Twitter at Brian Hooper __, and he'll tweet out when he does content. Always great content, really informative stuff. I've learned a lot watching Brian's videos on YouTube. Steve, thanks you for coming back. 2 weeks in a row you've been on the show, Steve. Really appreciate you coming on once again. Do you have any final thoughts? People can find you on Twitter at Buzzard. You can also, where can people find you, and any final thoughts?
Yeah, so always working behind the scenes here, working on projections, ownership projections, etc. I do the Discord every week where you can swing by and ask me anything. So I appreciate you guys coming by to ask some questions there. And other than that, just, yeah, I think just hanging out here. Hopefully I'll get another invite here sometime soon.
I mean, yeah, we'd love to have you on, every week, of course. Appreciate you coming on these past couple weeks. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you as well. If you haven't already done so, please do hit the like button on this video. We really appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of great content coming out the rest of the day. Up next is the NHL strategy show with Josh Harris and Michael Clifford. If you play NHL, we've got an NFL No House Advantage show with Aton and Jeff, NBA No House Advantage show with Terry and Gundacker, and then of course NBA Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock later tonight. So tons of content coming today and the rest of the weekend for all of your DFS needs. Good luck this weekend. Thanks for watching.